Listen up, lads. Welcome back to the Daily Crumper. And today, we's gonna be having us a nice little tier list for you today. And what I'd like to do is list the different factions of Warhammer 40k, 10th edition at least, in terms of how the matchup is between Dems and us Orcs. Or in other words, how good us Orcs are into said armies. I feel like this would give you gets a better insight into how different armies in the game work, as well as which ones you should look out for, or at the very least have a better understanding of if you's gonna encounter them on a tabletop. Now, these rankings is of course just this gets opinion. I play me's a lot of Orcs. I also play plenty of other armies as well, but I do not own and or regularly compete against every single army in the game. And of course, my local meta where I play might be different than what yours is. I'm based in the US, where we use GW standard terrain layouts and we use the GW Tournament Companion. I do not use UKTC terrain boards or anything like that. So that's a little background there. And in terms of how I'm ranking these factions, I'm basing it on how the Orc matchup is based on if you were going to encounter these armies at a local RTT or a GT level event where everybody is in the same mindset of competing to win, of course. I'm also basing my Orky opinions based on if you, the Orc player, is running the quote-unquote best Orc list you can run as of current. As of recording, it is December of 2025. We have not had the end of year data slate, or rather start of the next year data slate yet. So this is of course all subject to change, but as of recording, the best way to run Orcs is going to be either Warhorde or Bully Boys, running lots of big melee units crammed up in transports such as trucks. So this is assuming that you are running a list like that, you know, knobs in trucks, Beast Snagger Boys with a Beast Boss in trucks, Gazzy and Boys in trucks, with perhaps some firing units to back them up, such as Flash Kits or Tank Busters. Now, as far as the tier list itself, I've got my different tiers here. Down here we have got Runt Smashing. That is going to be the easiest matchups that you as an Orc player can come across. This does not mean that you are going to beat this faction 10 times out of 10 every time. It just means that there's not a lot of things in this opposing army that the Orc player has to worry about necessarily. Or at the very least, the Orcs have a lot of tools and utilities that will be good into said army. Because of course, as we all know, with the current state of the game, anybody can win any event with any army in the game, minus agents. You know, there are some balancing concerns with certain factions, but the game as a whole is very balanced as of late, which is very nice. Next up is Nothing to Worry About, as in this army could have a few tricks up its sleeve, and can sometimes be a handful to deal with, but again, as an Orc player, you have a game plan in said army, and have the tools to take it out most of the time. Even Fight is for them 50-50s, armies that Orcs are neither super good into or super bad into. They's got some things that are good against us, we've got certain things that are good against them. It's a right, proper, even playing field. Next up is Uphill Slog. This is going to be armies that typically have an even fight with us, but they have certain tools that are going to be better into us versus we have tools that are not necessarily going to be too good into them. So they're not impossible games to win, but it is going to be a little bit harder for you lads, and you're going to have to sweat a bit hard in order to beat them. And then next up at the top here, we have You's going to have a bad time. These are going to be the absolute worst matchups for the Greenskins. Again, not an impossible matchup, because a cunning git can win any game out there. It just means with these factions in particular, you's either going to need a certain amount of luck behind you, Hopefully use a particularly lucky Death Skulls Git, where you can outplay and roll a bit more hot dice than your opponent, or you need to rely on your opponent making a couple bad moves and or rolling badly at crucial points in the game to allow you to get an upper hand on them. Because if you and your opponent are on an even playing field, and they're playing one of these armies, they are going to start out with a much higher leg over your Gits, to where you're going to have a bad time trying to beat these lads as an Orc player. Meaning the Orcs, of course, do not have many tools to deal with said army. So, whether all that makes sense or not, I don't know, but let's just hop right into it, and I can let you Gits know what I think. So, first up is these Adeptus Mechanicus Gits, and for starters, we are going to throw these Gits in. You's going to have a bad time. So, the Admech, as we all know at this point, are the big scary boogeymen of Warhammer as of current. They're super cheap, they can load up on tons of units, they are incredibly lethal with all the changes they recently just got in the most recent data slate. They are as fast as Eldar, but can take hits just as well as Space Marine Gits. They're very difficult to deal with, lots of good shootings, lots of good melees. They can play the trading game better than anyone else in the army. They can throw small units up the board real quickly to try and jail you in your deployment zone. They can minus your OC, so that way you can't hold objectives or do actions. All loads of stuff, lads. So as of right now, until days get a nerf, it's going to be very hard as an Orc player to deal with these Gits. Next up's the Blood Angels. We're just going to put these lads in uphill slog. And the reason being is, I mean, there's a Marine faction, and typically across the board, us green-skinned lads in the Orc army are very good at dealing with Space Marine profiles. We've got plenty of good tools against these lads. Power Claws, being able to wound Marines on 2s and they're 2 damage flat, so each failed save kills a Git. Flash Gits, being strength 6 guns that are also at 2 damage, is good at killing Marines. Rockets, being able to get a bunch of blast shots off if they run big 10-man squads. There's a lot of good things that the Orcs have that can deal with Marines. But when you get into Blood Angels specifically, the main thing that they have a leg up on us Orcs is that, one, they're faster than us, as they run a lot of jump pack Gits. They move 12 inches, there's infantry so they can go through walls, and just about every detachment they've got allows them to advance in charge. It just means they're super quick, so it's very hard to try to get the jump on them first. Most of the time, they are going to be interacting with you as the Orc player first. And in addition, they have access to the Sanguinary Guard, which are 2-up saves, 3 wounds apiece, 4-up invuln, lethal in melee. And with Orcs, especially the melee units, you'll find that if you get stuck in and you're not able to kill whatever it is you charged the turn you charge it, if you leave them Gits alive and they are able to hit you back, most of the time you're gonna lose most of your melee unit on the smackback. Because as Orcs, our main durability is that we's tough 5 and that we's cheap, so there's a lot of us. But other than that, best armor save we've got outside of Meganovs is a 4-up armor save, which is not very good. So Sanguinary Guard, being AP2, AP3, most of the time will put us on a 6-up armor save or our 5-up WAS invuln save, and them's kind of saves are not very reliable, lads. And with Sanguinary Guard being -1 to hit and wound most of the time, it's very hard for us to be able to go into melee with them Gits and get enough damage through to crump them good without leaving 1 or 2 left to be able to smack us back and kill us in return. So that's why I put them in an uphill slog. Next up is the Black Templars, and they are going to go in even fight. Reason being for them is that for the most part, Black Templars are just your basic Space Marine equivalents. You know, toughness 4, 2 wounds, 3-up armor save, no invuln. They have some special Gits. Sword Brethren are very damaging if they can get you in lethal, or if they can get you in melee. But them Gits are Blade Guard without the invuln save. So there's 3 wounds, which means it's going to take 2 Power Claw hits apiece to get rid of them. but there's not as many of them gits. Usually there's about 6 men in a squad. So usually our melee units pair pretty well into Sword Brethren. Sometimes you see the Black Tide list, which runs like 100 Space Marine gits, and that's a really fun army to play into as an Orc player, let me tell you, gits. But it's not a super hard matchup, because again, we Orcs are really good at crumping Space Marines. The one iffy Templar list would be if they's running a lot of vehicles, because Orcs typically tend to struggle at killing tanks. So that might be the one list you'd worry about with the Templars, but as a whole, considering all of them lists, I'd put them in even fight. Alright, next up is the Spiky Tin Boys, the Chaos Knights. These gits I'm going to put in uphill slog. Like I just said with Black Templars, Orcs can sometimes struggle into big, heavier targets like vehicles, and the reason being is that we don't have a lot of units that are dedicated at killing vehicles. In melee, we've got the Breaker Boys, which have the anti-vehicle 3-up, weapons, but them gets only 2 attacks apiece, meaning they only go up to 3 in the wall, and they are really good attacks, but the volume is very lacking. So if you're running into a vehicle that has a invul, or some way of mitigating damage or -1 damage like a Redemptor Dreadnought or whatever have you, it makes it hard for them Breaker Boys to try to smash through and kill the vehicle in one go. And then our shooting unit is of course going to be the Tank Busters, but the Tank Busters can be pretty swingy sometimes. There's only D3 shots apiece. They get the +1 to hit and wound, which helps, means they're hitting on 4s, but at only strength 9 or strength 10, I believe strength 9. And that's going to wound most like heavier vehicles in the game on 5s. +1 to wound, making it back down to 4s, but 4s again is only going to be half the time that you're wounding them. So it's not great. And if your opponent used the smoke stratagem, then your Tank Busters are back to hitting on 5s, and all of a sudden they's doing little to no damage again. So they're not super reliable. You still have to run them, because again, that's one of the only units that we can use to kill vehicles. But again, not very reliable. So if you're playing into an army like Chaos Knights, where the army is literally only vehicles, it's going to be very hard for your Orcs to get in and crump them very reliably. You can use your knobs, but again, strength 9, strength 10 on the wall, which is going to wound most vehicles on 4s at that point. But the bigger knights, the tough 11, tough 12, that's going to be on 5s, so that's not great. Beast Neggers can help, because they get reroll hits, but they're only AP 1 and 1 damage, and the big knight's got like 26 wounds or something now. So you have to hope the Beast Boss can really pick up the slack and have one of them lucky turns where he hits a lot of dead wounds. But other than that, there isn't really much any other tools in the Orc kit to use. So if you can get good at positioning those key anti-vehicle units to go into them Spiky Knights, then you will probably have some success. But it's going to be difficult to do that. So yeah, I put them in uphill slog. Next up is the Necrons. These gits I put in even fight. Now, the Necrons have a lot of different list archetypes days run. They like running the Star Shatters with lots of vehicles. They like running the Canoptic Court with a bunch of them Wraiths and Doomstalker types. And there's even the Hypercrypt with a bunch of Catan Shards. And all of those list archetypes are good and playable. So that's where it's kind of hard and tricky to rate these lads. Because for instance, with Star Shatter, with Silent King and 3 Doomsday Orcs are not going to like running into that, because again, we struggle into vehicles. But if we play into something like Hypercrypt, which has a lot of Catan Shards, which are high toughness models but not a lot of wounds, a list like that, which also doesn't have a lot of models in it to begin with, us Orcs have enough mass on the table to just throw enough dice in melee or at range into Catan Shards to take them down, or we can just flood the board with gits and just out-OC everything and just hold all the primary. So you see what I mean? We have some good matchups and some bad matchups into different Necron armies. So as a result, I think I have to put them somewhere in the middle. Some good, some bad. So yeah, that's where they go. Next up, we've got the Chaos Marines. I'm going to put them in uphill slog. The reason being for these lads is the Chaos Marines like to play similarly to how us Gits do, where they put a bunch of melee units in tin cans, being like Chosen, or them Legionary boys with Chaos Lords, some Nemesis Claw units, and other Gits like that. So they play a similar game to us, but the difference being is that usually they take them Rhinos full of Gits, but they also back them up with a lot of guns, lads. And let me tell you, Forge Fiends are proper scary, lads. They strong enough to pop trucks. If they catch your knob units out in the open, they will pick up the whole squad. Same thing with any big squads used running. Beast Snagger boys, 20-man boy squad with Gaz, whatever's used running. A Forge Fiend is very, very good into it. So when you're playing into these spiky lads, you gotta be very careful where you're putting your lads, so that way they won't be caught out in the open and shot to pieces. So aside from the shooting pieces, the rest of the Chaos Marine lads are just big melee units. And how you play against them is just make sure that you can hit them and crump them first before they hit and crump you. So because of them extra added shooting units, that's where they go in uphill slog. Next up is the Banana Boys, the Custodes of the Emperor. They's gonna go and you's gonna have a bad time, lads. And I'll tell you why. So, Custodes obviously are very expensive. They are the most elite of elite armies. Not a lot of Gits on the table, but each one being toughness 6, 3 wounds, sometimes 4, 2 up armor save, 4 up invuln. Most of the time, they're going to be -1 to hit in combat. And I'll tell you, the issue is, I'd say not only do Orc armies struggle into vehicles, but they also struggle into 2-up armor save armies. Because we's, as greenskins, also lack a lot on the AP front. There is very little sources of AP greater than 2, AP3, AP4 and the like, in our codex. The only examples I can think of are going to be like Kill Saws, which have little to no amount of attacks. Gazi, which Gazi's good, but he's only 1 Git. And something else like a shock attack gun, which are pretty expensive now and only work in certain lists. So most of the time, you're going to be stuck with AP1 or AP2. And that means when you go into these Banana Boys, they's going to have 3-up armors, 4-up armors, and they's going to be able to shrug off a lot of the damage that you're trying to put into them. And that plays back into what I was talking about with the Blood Angels, where if you as the Orc player charge into these Custodes, kill only maybe 1, 2, 3 of them models, and the remaining 2 or 3 Gits smack and kill all your Gits in retaliation, then you're going to be in a really bad spot, lads. And it just makes it to where when you're playing against these Gits, I get very hesitant to throw my resources and units at them, because if them Custodes are going to have a good armor save, or if I put them on that 4-up invuln and they make just 1 or 2 too many saves, then I'm going to suffer for it a lot. But luckily for us, Custodes are currently not really in the meta. A lot of people think they're proper shit right now, and hopefully it stays that way for a little bit, so that way we Gits don't really have to see them. So yeah, that's where they go. Alright, next up is the Dark Angels. Dark Angels are going to go in uphill slog. I know, Gits, I know. As of right now, it seems like Orcs have bad matchups into most armies in the game, but I promise you there will be plenty going in those last tiers, so hold on with me. But yeah, when it comes to Dark Angels, again, they're similar to something like Necrons, where they have a lot of different archetypes that they can run. They can run the Ravenwing Gits with 30 to 40 bikes. They can run the Deathwing Gits with a bunch of Terminators like the Deathwing Knights. Or I've also seen quite a few tank-only lists in Dark Angels using Ironstorm. But the difference with Dark Angels over something like Necrons is that most list archetypes with Dark Angels, we's not too good into, lads. If you pull up to a game and you're playing against Dark Angels Ironstorm, and they've got a Pulse Executioner, couple Redempted Dreadnoughts, Ballistic Shreds in the back, lots of 2-up armor saves, -1 damage, Armor of Contempt, shoots the crap out of you from long ways away. It's going to be very hard to get your gits up the board without them getting shot to pieces before they get into melee. So that's definitely a difficult army to play into. But then there's also the Deathwing list with the Deathwing Knights. Them gits is 4 wounds apiece on a Deathwing Knight at -1 damage base. That base rule is -1 damage. 4 wounds apiece, 2-up armor, 4-up invuln. That is insanely hard to chew through. Your Power Claws are now 1 damage. You need 4 failed Power Claw saves to kill one of them gits. You can send a whole 10-man squad of knobs with a war boss, kill maybe half the squad, and then those remaining 2 are gonna kill probably like 6 to 8 of your knobs. And that's not too good, lads. If you try to shoot them from range, well, your flash kits, gonna be wounding them on 3s, but they only AP 1, and the 2 damage gets cut down to 1 damage, so that's not great. Try to shoot them with rockets, well, there's only a 5-man squad, so you are getting blast, but it's not a lot of blast. Your 3 damage goes to 2 damage, but it still needs 2 failed saves to kill 1 git, so the math doesn't work very well on that. Don't get me started on the Lion with his fights first 3-up invuln, and his 2 damage sweeps, which pick up entire bricks of gits. There's a lot of stuff in the Dark Angel army that an Orc player does not want to see on the other side of the table. Again, you can beat it. It's not impossible. It's why there's an uphill slog. There's a lot of things that are just difficult to deal with. So that's why it is there. Alright, next up is the spiky pointy ears, the Drukhari. And these gits are going to be the first to go into Run Smashing, which is quite nice. And the reason being for this is that Drukhari, whilst they are fast and they are very good in combat, and they've got plenty of little tricks, they're very cheap, so they can run lots of different units. But the issue with these gits is that they don't have a lot of means of shooting. They have them Scourges, which are those fly, shoot, fly units with the big anti-tank guns. And they've got the gunboats, which run lots of Dark Lances. But that's really it. So when it comes to popping vehicles as a Drukhari git, you don't have a lot of options. You have little to no options in melee to kill vehicles. So what I'm getting at is that if you are the Orc player running lots of melee gits in trucks, and you staging them well, you're sticking them up behind terrains and keeping them nice and hidden, it means the Drukhari player, the only way that they're going to be able to kill your trucks and get to your gits inside is if they charge the truck with multiple units, kill the truck with the first activation, and have the second unit pile into the gits that hop out. And again, like I said, Drukhari is not very good at killing vehicles in melee. So if you're able to do that little tactic, you're going to be able to save your gits inside your transports from being harmed. And on top of that, when you do decide to hop out your trucks and go charging off, these Dark Eldar gits are, most of the time, toughness 3, 4-up armor save, 6-up invuln save, 1 wound. Which means you could shoot these gits with your sluggers, your shooters, your custom shooters, whatever gun you've got, shoot them at these gits, because it will actually kill models consistently. As an Orc player, I'm used to not even worrying about most of my shooting phase, because it's not going to really do anything anyways. I'm going to shoot the big shooter off my truck, it's got 5 shots, I'm going to hit like twice, I'm going to wound maybe once into whatever it is I'm going into, it's AP 0, they're going to have a good save, they're going to make it. 9 times out of 10. So most of the time I don't even bother. But again, with these spiky-eared elves, shoot them slugger lads. Shoot every pistol you've got. You will kill models. So yeah, I feel like the Drukhari just don't have a lot of good tools into us Gits, so that's why they go in and run smashing. Next up is the weird Gits, the Demons. I'm putting them in nothing to worry about, lads. And the reason being is that the really only good way to run demons right now, if you can even call it good, is just to run a bunch of them big demon Gits. You know, your Bloodthirsters, your Great Unclean Ones, your Keepers of Secrets and the like. And a lot of them big scary Gits have high toughness and they've got high wounds, but their saves, they typically rely on that 4 or 5 up invuln, but they have no armor save. Which is good for us orcs, because again, we don't like it when Gits have very good armor saves. So if you only have a 4 or 5 up save and that's it, then we can force a lot of wounds, especially in melee, with power claws and the like, on that 4 or 5 up invuln. So it means that most of the time, you can either charge a big melee brick into a greater demon and kill it within 1 to 2 rounds of combat, or at the very least, you can charge into them with like 20 packs of boys, or even a 10 pack of knobs, and keep them there whilst out OCing them big Gits, because a lot of time, then greater demons have a small amount of attacks at high damage, which doesn't matter because you use a lot of infantry Gits, or if they do have sweep attacks, they're not great profiles. Usually they are low AP and only 1 damage. So your big boy squads with pain boys ain't going to be taking as much damage. Your knobs aren't going to be taking much damage because they can soak up individual wounds. It ends up not being a super great time into the demons. But for the demons, rather. So whereas you could sometimes struggle with it, if you don't have mass amount of bodies, for the most part, demons ain't too bad. Alright, next up is the Stinky Boys, Death Guard, and they are the next ones going into you's gonna have a bad time. And the reason being for these Gits is that, for one, their contagion that they can pick to give everyone a -1 weapon skill ballistic skill is critical in them beating us orcs. Because a lot of our high damage melee, such as power claws, are going to hit on 4s at best. Yes, we can take war bosses, that'll give them a +1 to hit, but if the Death Guard is going to put us back on that 4, going from hitting on a 3 to hitting on a 4 is a very big drop off, lads, in terms of math and whatnot. Because usually with the contagion, they typically pick the -1 save, but again, us orcs, usually we have bad saves to begin with, so they don't need to do that. So instead they pick that -1 to hit, and that is very difficult for us orcs to get around. It means you're shooting nothing, because you're hitting on 6s, and in melee most of the time you're hitting on 4s, or 3s, and just reducing the amount of damage you can do. So it's very difficult. And on top of that, most, if not all, Death Guard units, I feel, have a lot of flamers for just no reason. Plague Marines can take a bunch of flamers. The Death Shroud Terminators just have a bunch of flamers. All of them are like anti-infantry 3-up. So that gets around us toughness 5. Or even tough 6 with the Mega Knobs. So you have to be really careful where you's moving and where you's charging from, because these Gits will flame you like no tomorrow before you's even getting a melee to even have a chance to crump these Gits. So yeah, I think between those two values, it's very difficult for us orcs to play into them Stinky Boys. So that's why they're going to go there. Alright, next up is the Deathwatch Gits, and I am calling them the Deathwatch Gits, not Imperial Agents, because Imperial Agents is a fake army. But Deathwatch, I'm putting in even fight. They's very similar to something like a Black Templar, where they's pretty much like basic Space Marines, but just with a couple extra special things. They've got some tricks that are good against us orcs because we are like a Xenos army and that's kind of their thing. But at the end of the day, again, they's just Space Marine bodies and we's really good at crumping Space Marines. And in this case, there's even less of them because they're a lot more elite because of it. Because of all them fancy tricks they've got. So I put them in even fight. Maybe even leaning towards nothing to worry about, because again, they're more expensive without being more durable. But we'll stick them in even fight for the time being. Next up is the regular pointy-eared elves of the Eldar. So these gits I'm putting in nothing to worry about. Now, this might be a little bit controversial because these Aeldari gits alongside the Admech are the two easily best armies in the game right now. The Aeldari, they're cheap, super fast, can blow you up without you even being able to say anything about it. And they have so many little units all over the board, doing all the points, getting all the secondaries, winning the game super easy. And anytime they screw something up, they've got them weird miracle dice things to just make it to where they succeed anyways. So it's very hard to deal with these kids. But, as an Orc player, I can tell you that a lot of reasons why we's good into the Drukhari are mirrored with the normal Aeldari. All your piddly gunshots from your sluggers and your shooters will kill Aeldari gits. Your basic boys, strength 4, AP 1 damage, will kill Aeldari models like no tomorrow, lads. That big scary fire dragon unit that costs like 250 to 300 points that just blew up your battle wagon in one go, send 10 boys in that squad and it will pick up that whole unit. Easy. We have a lot of good profiles into Aeldari. We's cheap, so we can play the trading game just as well as they can. So yeah, only reason they're not in runt smashing is because, again, these is just really cheap and have a lot of hard-hitting stuff that is quick to where the Aeldari player can usually hit you first before you can retaliate. So you gotta look out for that. But as an overall, Orcs have a pretty good matchup into them. Next up is the Grey Knight gits. They are gonna go in, you's gonna have a bad time. Now these gits, similarly to the Custodes, are a lot of, it's almost exclusively 2-up armor saves with 4-up invulns, sometimes 5-up invulns. So you already have to compete with that, where again we don't have a lot of AP, and if your opponent is particularly savvy at rolling 4-up invulns, that can definitely sour your experience a little bit, where they will be able to punch you back and or shoot you back after you fail to kill them because they made one too many saves. And with the Grey Knights in particular, most of their army in both shooting and melee is strength 6, AP 2, 2 damage. And that profile is super stupid good into the Orcs. Strength 6 means they're wounding almost all of our infantry on 3s. You're wounding most of your vehicles on 5s. AP 2 is going to put us again on either a 6-up armor or a 5-up invuln from the wall. And 2 damage is of course going to pick up all your knob type gits, knobs, flash gits, breaker boys, tank busters, all them gits picked up like nothing. And it's very difficult to deal with. So yeah, that's why I put them up there, no problem. Well, next up is the Genestealer Cults, them weird humies. They's gonna go in runt smashing. And the reason being is, again, similar to Drukhari, again, they are a lot of toughness 3, 4-up armor save, most of the time 5-up really, 1 wound gits. Yes, they can revive themselves and pop up at a deep strike or reserve or whatever it is, but us Orc profiles are really good at killing Humi equivalent gits, and the Genestealer Cults are no different. They can get a little bit more difficult to deal with if they start allying in some of the bigger bugs from Tyranids, but I've heard that detachment is pretty bad, so typically you don't have to worry about it. But if you end up playing against Genestealer Cults, which they aren't really a popular army, but if you do, and they're running lots of them neophytes, or them acolyte hybrids, or even a bunch of them aberrants, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just charge them with your gits just like you would any others. They'll go down pretty easy. And if these do come back, odds are you're going to have a lot of gits flooding the table, which is going to restrict where them gits can come back and deep strike at. And if they do, and if they're able to go in a place where you don't like them, just charge them and crump them again. If anything, the Orcs love fighting these gits because it's endless amounts of lads to crump. So I say to my Genestealer Cults, enemies, come get some, lads. I'll fight you any day of the week. Alright, next up is the normal humiots of the Imperial Guard, and these lads are going in uphill slog for sure. Now, the difference between the Astra Militarum gets versus the Genestealer Cults is that whereas the Guard Boys run tons of Humi Gits, they also like to back them up with big, chunky, hard to kill, hard to crump tanks. Which again, big, chunky tanks is hard for us Orcs to deal with because of the low AP we've got and the low strength compared to them bigger vehicles like your Lehman Russes and your Rugal Dawns, which are toughness 11, toughness 12. It just means outside of like kill saws and breaker boys, running them on 3s, which again isn't great because they have the low amount of attacks. Most other things used putting in an Orc list is going to wound these Gits on 5s in melee, which isn't super great. And on top of that, when they run lots of infantry in front of their tanks, usually they're going to use it to hold you off so you can't even get to their back lines in the first place, which makes it doubly difficult to deal with the Imperial Guard because we don't have a lot of units that fly, which means we get stuck on these speed bump units that people will throw at us every turn to try to hold the Orcs off at bay, which is a very good strategy against Orcs. And there's another reason why these lads are an uphill slog. Alright, next up is the normal tin boys of the Imperial Knights. They's going in even fight. And the reason for that being is Imperial Knights have the same issues that we have to deal with like with the Chaos Knights. But the difference being is that the the Imperial Knights Codex that came out is supposedly not super great. So you don't see a lot of Imperial Knights anymore. They don't have that like 6-up feel no pain that makes them particularly hard to deal with. And a lot of their data sheets got worse. But I'm gonna put them in even fight because even though they have them downsides now, it's still difficult because they are just an army full of vehicles that's hard for us to crump. But if there's bad vehicles, then that probably gets us a leg up. So that's why they're in even fight. Alright, next up is the Bug Boys. They's going in even fight. And the reason for that being is, again, similar to the Necrons, they have a bunch of different lists that they can take. And particular ones we're very good into. I think the new tunnel-y bug detachment, the subterranean assault ones, we're particularly good into, because Morlocks ain't particularly tough to kill, and them Raveners that come out, or the Warriors, don't have great armor saves, so us Orcs are good into them Gits. The Sneaky Bugs detachment, where you can run a lot of infiltrating units, the one that's you're meant to run a bunch of Electors and whatnot. I forget what it's called, but we're pretty good into that detachment, because again, abilities like Stealth and Lone Op don't really matter if you use right up in them Gits' face trying to crump them. So if they're trying to use detachments that have a bunch of tricks like that, just charge at them head first and you'll have good success, I promise. But on the flip side, you have things like Crusher Stampede or other detachments that like running a lot of the big monsters, your Tyrannifexes, your Exocrines, your Norns, and a lot of those big Gits are very difficult for us to deal with because again, big monsters are very similar to big vehicles where we need to have high AP and high damage and high strength that again the Orcs just don't really have too much as of right now. So that's why I bring them into even fight, because they've got some good things, they've got some bad things. At least in terms of how us Orcs deal with them. Next up is the Orcs themselves. So when we's fighting our fellow greenskins, I'm going to put them in even fight. And the reason being is that, one, Orc on Orc violence is the best violence there is, of course, without a shadow of a doubt. So you're always going to have a good time regardless, because no matter what happens, when an Orc and an Orc come together on a table, Orcs win. So just keep that in mind, and you'll have an even better time. But in terms of tactically, Orcs are really good into Orcs because a lot of our profiles are good into Orcs. Power Claws at AP 2/2 damage are going to put opposing knobs on their 5-up war invuln or 6-up armor save, and the 2 damage will kill each individual unit that fails a save. Orc Boys on the wall at strength 5 AP 1/1 damage with sustained hits of a Warhorde is going to be really good at clearing out opposing units of big squads of boys. Tank Busters getting a bunch of blast shots off on big squads of orcs is going to kill them no problem. So we have a lot of good units and profiles that we can use into fellow greenskins. The issue being, of course, is that your fellow greenskin you're playing against is going to have the same exact units, tools, and abilities to use against you. And that might be the tricky part as to how you're going to win a matchup like that, is wagering which of your units and resources you're going to be able to give up at certain points in order to make sure that the opposing orc player doesn't just completely kill you on a smackback. So yeah, because of all the ups and downs, I put them in even fight. Next up is the Lady Gits of the Adeptus Sororitas. Put them in nothing to worry about. Similarly to Genestealers and both kinds of elves, Sisters are toughness 3. They have better armor saves, they've got 3 ups and 2 ups. But the difference being is that toughness 3 means that you only have to be strength 6 or better to wound these Gits on 2s, which means Flash Gits are wounding Sisters on 2s. Beast Snagger Boys on the wall is wounding these Gits on 2s. And we can throw so many of those profiles at these Gits. It just makes it to where you can usually just drown them in dice, even if they have good saves. If you're only AP1, AP2, it doesn't matter. If you're handing them 30 saves, odds are they're gonna die. So yeah, just from a damage perspective and just how many units we can take, I would definitely say that orcs have a good matchup in the Sisters. Next up is the good old Space Marines. Now I'm going to put these Gits into even fight. I've already pretty much talked about Space Marines, what with going over the other Divergent chapters, but I'll just reiterate, orcs have very good profiles into Space Marine units. There's a couple tricksy detachments and lists that you could run into. Again, you could run into something like a Gilliman gun line, which is a bunch of tanks surrounded by the big beefy Primarch man himself, and a list like that might just shoot you off the table, sitting in the back, so it's hard for you to run up and charge them. But aside from that, a basic, bog standard, combined arms Space Marine list, you know, something running like Blade Guard, Jump Pack Intercessors, Scout units, Hail Blasters, all of those basic Space Marine units, them Gits will die to orcs very, very quickly. But because there's so many different ways of running Space Marines, and again, there are lists that you won't be very good into, or as a whole, I think I have to put them in even fight. Next up is the Space Wolves. These go in an uphill slog, and the difference being that, yes, they are Space Marines, and we have a bunch of good tools into them, like I've said, but a lot of times when you face the Space Wolves, they're just going to be running a bunch of annoying Gits like Thunderwolf Cavalry. And that unit alone makes the entire faction difficult to deal with. Thunderwolf Cav are toughness 6, 4 wounds apiece, with a 4-up invuln. And usually, whether they're running Champions of Russ, or Stormlance, or some other third attachment, they're going to have some tricks up their sleeve, like giving you -1 to hit or wound in melee. They could Blood Surge to make it to where they charge you in your turn. They can reactive move to make it to where it's harder for you to charge them in general. They's very quick. Usually they can advance and charge off of a stratagem or an enhancement or whatnot. So it is very hard to get the charge off on these Gits in the first place, and it is very hard to avoid them if it's not your turn from being charged and crumped by these big wolfy Gits. So in short, our profiles are not super great into a unit like that, and usually they's going to get the drop on you first, which makes it doubly difficult to deal with. So that's why Space Wolves are an uphill slog. Alright, next up is the Tau Gits. Tau Gits are going an uphill slog, and the main reason for that is that Tau lists usually run a lot of scouting units and a lot of infiltrating units. They have Piranhas that can scout 9. They have Stealth Suits that infiltrate. Ghost Keels infiltrate. Pathfinders can infiltrate. Croat Carnivores can scout. They scout like 7, I believe. They've got, I believe it's an enhancement in Mont Car, which is the most popular detachment right now, that allows other units to scout. So it basically means that the Tau player can have like half their army in the middle of the table before the game starts. And that can be difficult because, especially if the Tau player goes first, they can take a cheap throwaway unit like a squad of Pathfinders, infiltrate them up the board, and if they get turn 1, just advance them and line them up in front of use ORKS deployment zone, preventing most, if not all, of your army from moving up the table turn 1. Because again, we as ORKS don't have a lot of flying units that can just hop over opposing models. So if you get boxed in your deployment zone off of a play like this with the Pathfinders, then it's going to be very difficult for you as the Orc player to get into the game, because usually turn 1, as the Orc player, you are using that time to advance up all of your transports full of melee units to stage in the middle of the board ruins. But if you're not able to do that because you're stuck in your deployment zone because of these Tau kits that are infiltrating everywhere, then on the Tau turn 2, they can move up all of their units and get in a good position to be able to get the drop on yous before you is even able to move. So that can be why Tau is a difficult matchup. But aside from a weird play like that, most things, a lot of their infantry is toughness 3 with bad armor saves, and I've already told you why Orcs are good into that. But then other things like crisis suits are low toughness and a 3-up armor save. Usually they don't have an inborn, so Orcs are good into that. Even Riptides, they're like toughness 9, but they've got a lot of wounds. So knobs, especially on the wall, are going to be able to kill Riptides very easily. So you don't have to worry about that too much. Yes, they've got the 4-up inborn, but if you're winning them on 3s, and in something like Warhorde where you can get sustained hits, you can usually just throw a bunch of saves on something like a Riptide, and typically you can just math them to death with just how many saves you're dumping on them. So actual damage-wise, profile to profile, Orcs are very good in the Tau. But it's just because of the weird tools that he's got in their toolbox and the abilities that their unit has that can throw yous for a loop. So watch out for them, lads. Next up is 1,000 Suns. He's going to put these gits into even fight. Reason being is, again, there is a Space Marine faction. He's good in the Space Marines. They've got some weird tricks, but most of it boils down to mortal wounds. And mortal wounds are good, don't get me wrong, but they's not as good into something like Orcs, because again, we're so cheap and we can put a lot of wounds on the table that if you Doomball our truck to death, and then use some other weird psychic power to do mortal wounds on the knobs when they hop out, well, each knob is 2 wounds, and a 10-pack of knobs is 20 wounds, plus a war boss for another 5 or 6, I believe. Means that you can take 6 mortal wounds to the chin, lose 3 knobs, and still have most of your unit to throw out a high amount of damage. So if anything, we've got a lot of good qualities to fight against the 1,000 Suns. The one thing you do have to worry about, though, and the reason I'm putting him in even fight, is a lot of times the 1,000 Suns also have a lot of flamers. Usually it's going to be them Rubik squads with a bunch of their warp flamers. And those you gotta watch out for, lads. Because that could torch an entire Orc unit before they even get to finalize their charge. So look out for them gits for sure, but other than that, 1,000 Suns, not too bad. Next up is Votann. Votann's going in nothing to worry about. Reason for that being is that Votann usually don't have a whole lot of units, and the ones that they do bring are pretty fragile. Even something tough like their Terminators, the Einir, or no, the Hearthguard, I believe they're called. They're Terminators, so they got the 2-up save, and they got the Invuln, with only 2 wounds apiece. And that is that's a very big difference, because, again, Power Claws do damage, so each failed save kills a Terminator. So our profiles are very good in the Votann. And the Votann army rule to put judgment tokens on things that make it to where they are particularly good into certain units is usually more or less wasted on the Orcs. Because if everything's in a transport, then you have to pick the trucks. And if the trucks die, who cares? They's cheap. And they're mainly there just to soak up damage anyways. Or say they don't pick the trucks, well, Orcs are pretty cheap across the board. No individual one unit is particularly impressive. So if the Votann decide to throw judgment tokens on them gits, like your boy squads, your flesh git squads, hell, even your orb squads, if you end up losing that unit, it's not that big of a deal because you've got a half a dozen more on the horizon ready to charge the gits on your turn. So between those two things, that's why I'd say they've not too much to worry about. Land raiders are pretty difficult to deal with though, or not land raiders, land fortresses. So look out for them gits for sure. Next up's World Eaters. World Eaters I'm putting in nothing to worry about, and that is going to be for a similar reason as to what I talked about with the Tau, where the Tau can box us in a deployment zone with all the infiltrating units they can take. With the World Eater's case, we as the Orc player can box the World Eater player into their deployment zone using our scouts and infiltrates. I've had games before where I've ran the Zodgrod brick and I gave them the big scout, and then I wad turn 1 in something like Bully Boys, and I advanced that big squad of Grots with Zodrog and just lined up the World Eater's deployment zone completely, and I made it to where none of his gits could move turn 1 because hardly anything in the World Eater's unit, in the World Eater's army can fly. They have like the Demon Prince can fly, and then Angron of course can fly, but nobody brings Angron anymore because he got taken out back and shot once the Codex came out. So really the Demon Prince is the only thing you gotta worry about, and not a lot of gits bring them anyways. But say you don't want to jail your World Eater opponent, if you just want to hit him head on in the face with your big crumping melee units, well you can do that too, because odds are your Orc units are going to be cheaper than the World Eater units, so even if you do have to trade some resources, usually you are trading up into World Eaters, because 8-bound, crazy expensive. Big squads of Berserkers, crazy expensive. Demon Princes, crazy Zoggen expensive. So if you're not doing the box them in approach, just charge them. Charge them and kill them, you will win out in the War of Attrition, believe me. And then finally, last army in the docket is the Emperor's Children, which is going to go right next to the World Eaters in nothing to worry about too much, because they boil down to Space Marine profiles, which again, we're really good into. They can advance and charge sometimes, but the main downfall with Emperor's Children is similar to Drukhari, where they don't have a lot of shooting units, and the ones they do have are not good at popping vehicles. So if the Emperor's Children want to kill you, they have to charge you. And if you are stuck in trucks and battle wagons, the Emperor's Children is going to have a hard time dealing with that. So remember gits, mech up. If you have an important melee unit, put it in a can. Because if it's not in a can and it's stuck slogging around on foot, it will be shot and or charged and killed before they're able to do anything. So that is why Emperor's Children go there, and that is the final army that we will be talking about today. So that's a tier list, lads. Let me know what you think down below. I try to give just small snippets of each individual army. Didn't want to go too into depth because I didn't want this to be too crazy long, but by the looks of it, it's going to be a crazy long video anyways. So that's great. But yeah, let me know what you think down below, lads. And if you want me to do more in-depth guides on each individual army in terms of how the orcs are good into them, I did one for Imperial Knights way back when theirs was crazy good in the meta, and that video did pretty good. So who knows, if you want to see something similar to that, let me know. And yeah, with that, that's been the Daily Crumper. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.